I remembered the cold first. The kind that crawled straight through my jacket and into my bones. I stood in the middle of the grocery store parking lot, fingers numb, breath shaking in the December air, when my father shoved my suitcase into my chest so hard I almost fell backward. The wheels scraped against the asphalt, clothes tumbling out like my life was being spilled for the whole world to judge. People were staring. I felt their eyes burning into me. A 17-year-old girl with mascara streaks she kept wiping away, pretending she wasn't crying. My father pointed at me like I was something he needed to wash off his hands. "You're on your own now. Don't come back here asking for help." That sentence hit harder than the shove. Harder than every slammed door and every accusation that I asked for too much. My heart didn't break. Froze. Thought, don't cry. Not here. Not now. Not in front of them. My stepmother sat in the truck pretending to dab at tears. My stepbrother, Trent, smirked at me like exile was something he won. The engine roared. Red taillights cut through the fog. And just like that they left. They left me standing there in the cold December night with nothing but a broken suitcase and shattered dignity. They left me standing beside my spilled clothes, my humiliation, and the version of myself that believed they'd ever love me the way I deserved. I bent down slowly, gathering my things with shaking hands. A blouse I'd saved up for. Jeans with a hole in the knee. The jacket my grandmother gave me before she died. Each piece felt heavier than it should have. Someone walked past, an older woman, and said quietly, almost to herself, "God help that girl." But here's the truth I learned later. God wasn't coming. No one was. Just me. My name is Kara Whitfield. And that night was the moment I realized blood doesn't make someone family. Loyalty does. Effort does. Respect does. And he'd severed every thread of that the moment he drove away. I didn't know then that I'd rebuild my life piece by piece. I didn't know I'd rise higher than he ever imagined. And I definitely didn't know that years later, he would show up on my doorstep, defeated, desperate, and needing the daughter he once abandoned in a parking lot. But we're not there yet. To understand how I became the woman who answered that door with steady hands and a calm heart, you need to know how everything fell apart first. You need to understand the years of pain, struggle, and determination that built the person I became. People always assumed the betrayal started that night in the parking lot. Didn't. It started years before, the moment my father remarried. When Trent and his mother moved in, everything in the house shifted. Suddenly I wasn't a daughter. I was a problem. And Trent. He was the son everyone was required to orbit around. He'd leave dishes everywhere. I'd get yelled at for not picking them up. He'd skip school. I'd get accused of setting a bad example. He'd get a C-. They'd throw a growth celebration. I'd get straight A's. My father wouldn't even look up from the TV. And I learned something dangerous very young. You can't earn love from people who enjoy withholding it. You can't win a game where the rules change every time you get close to winning. You can't be good enough for people who need you to be the villain in their story. One night, I overheard Trent laughing with his mom in the kitchen. "She's so easy to blame. Dad believes everything." That was the first time I felt my chest hollow out. I told myself it would get better. Didn't. It only got worse as the months turned into years. The favoritism became more obvious. The cruelty became sharper. And my father became a stranger I no longer recognized. My stepmother had a talent. Crafted, polished, weaponized sweetness. She'd whisper to neighbors, "We're trying with Kara. She's just difficult." I'd walk into the room and conversations would stop, like I was a storm they didn't want to get caught in. She painted me as ungrateful, troubled, impossible. And people believed her because she had perfected the art of looking like the victim. One afternoon, I came home early and heard her sigh dramatically behind my bedroom door. "She's just ungrateful. I don't know how much more we can take." My father's voice followed, tired and resigned. "I'm done with her attitude. She'll be out the second she hits 18. I remembered standing there, hand on the doorknob, feeling like the floor dropped out from under me. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't temporary. They were planning my disappearance from their family. They were counting down the days until they could legally abandon me. I slept that night with a suitcase packed under my bed, just in case. It turned out I needed it sooner than I thought. Much sooner. Because they didn't even wait for me to turn 18. They threw me out at 17, still a child by law, still their responsibility. But responsibility meant nothing to them anymore. Only Trent mattered. Only their perfect little family unit mattered. If there was one thing I thought my father would protect, it was my college fund. He'd opened it when I was little. He used to tell me, "This is your future." I believed him. I worked hard in school, maintained perfect grades, dreaming of the day I'd use that money to build something better. That fund represented hope. It represented escape. It represented the one thing they couldn't take from me. But futures, I learned, can be stolen. I found out by accident. I'd gone to the bank to get a statement for a financial aid form. The teller looked confused and said, "Honey, this account has been closed." A sick electric panic spread through me. My vision blurred. My hands started shaking. When I confronted my father, he didn't even flinch. He just said, "We needed the money for Trent's program. He has potential. You'll be fine." Potential. That word hit me like a slap. I stared at him, waiting for remorse. There was none. That was the night something inside me hardened. That was the night I realized I couldn't trust him with anything. Not my future, not my safety, not even basic decency. Everything I'd have to build myself. From nothing. With nothing. And that realization was both terrifying and strangely freeing. I could still see the parking lot lights glaring off the hood of the truck. The smell of exhaust mixing with winter air. The way Trent's face twisted into a victorious grin, like he'd finally won some competition I didn't know we were having. My father threw my suitcase at me and said the words that carved themselves into my ribs, words I'd hear in my nightmares for years. "You're on your own now. Don't come back here asking for help." The cold air burned my lungs. My pride held back my tears. And when the taillights disappeared into the fog, I whispered to myself, "Okay, watch me." That's the night I stopped begging to be loved and started building a life where I didn't need them. That's the night I made a promise to myself. I would survive. I would succeed. And I would never, ever let them see me broken. That parking lot became my turning point. The moment I stopped being his daughter and started becoming myself. I stood there for 20 minutes in the cold, just breathing, just thinking, just planning. Then I picked up my suitcase, zipped it closed as best I could, and started walking. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I was going forward. People romanticize struggle. They shouldn't. My first home was an attic room rented from an elderly couple who needed extra income. The ceiling was so low I had to crouch near the walls. I showered in a basement with a pull-chain light and pipes that banged like ghosts. Winter nights were freezing because the heating didn't reach that high. Summer days were suffocating because the air just sat there, thick and still. I worked 2 jobs. One at a diner serving breakfast and lunch, one stocking shelves at a grocery store at night, while finishing my final year of high school. Some nights I fell asleep sitting up because lying down felt like a luxury I hadn't earned. I ate cheap ramen and day-old bread from the bakery section. Counted pennies. I wore the same 3 outfits on rotation, washing them in the basement sink. But in that tiny attic, something new took root inside me. A stubborn, quiet resilience. I wasn't surviving for them. I was surviving to become someone they could never break again. Every shift I worked, every exam I passed, every small victory added another brick to the wall I was building around my heart. I was building armor. I was building strength. And I was building a future they said I'd never have. My first real job was in logistics. Dry. Sexy. Oil-stained clipboards and endless spreadsheets tracking shipments across warehouses. But I loved it. Because it was the first place where being smart wasn't a threat. It was currency. It was valuable. It was respected. I watched everything. Who talked too much, who talked too little, who knew things, who pretended to. I memorized the flow of power, the way decisions were made 2 levels above the official org chart. I studied the patterns of success and failure. I learned who to trust and who to avoid. I learned how to read people, how to anticipate problems, how to position myself as indispensable. Being underestimated became my favorite advantage. People assumed the quiet girl from nowhere didn't have much to offer. I didn't correct them. Not yet. I let them think I was simple, grateful, easy to overlook. Meanwhile, I was learning everything, absorbing every lesson, planning every move. And slowly, quietly, I started climbing. One careful step at a time. My manager noticed first. Then her manager. Within a year, I wasn't just doing my job. I was fixing everyone else's problems too. And that's when things started changing. We had this recurring nightmare. Delayed shipments that cost the department thousands each quarter. Everyone blamed everyone else. Meetings went in circles. Managers got defensive. Nothing changed. It had been happening for 2 years before I arrived. And everyone just accepted it as the cost of doing business. I analyzed data for days, barely sleeping. I created spreadsheets tracking every delayed shipment, every vendor, every route, every weather pattern, every variable I could think of. Then I found it. Pattern no one else had noticed. A timing issue that cascaded through 3 different systems, creating delays that compounded exponentially. When I presented the solution, my manager just stared at me, stunned. The room went quiet. "Kara, how did you even catch this?" I shrugged, trying to hide the tremor in my hands. But inside I felt something uncoil, the tiniest flicker of pride. For the first time I saw who I could be. For the first time since that parking lot I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was worth something after all. Not because someone told me, but because I proved it to myself. That moment changed everything. It opened a door I didn't know existed. Years passed, slowly, painfully, but with purpose. I worked my way up, assistant, coordinator, analyst, senior analyst, team lead. Every promotion felt like another layer of armor. Every raise felt like proof that I could make it without them. Every achievement felt like revenge against every person who said I'd never amount to anything. The day I closed on my condo, I stood in the empty living room surrounded by sunlight and silence. Hardwood floors I'd chosen. Windows that looked out over the city. Walls that were mine to paint any color I wanted. No shouting. No accusations. No walking on eggshells. Just peace. Pure, earned, beautiful peace. I pressed my palm to the wall and whispered, "I did this without you." I meant every word. This was mine. Every square foot. Every window. Every locked door that kept the world out when I needed it to. This wasn't just a home. It was proof. Proof that I survived. Proof that I thrived. Proof that abandoning me was the biggest mistake he ever made. And then the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I looked through the peephole, my entire world tilted. Because standing on my doorstep was the man who swore I'd never amount to anything. The man who threw me away like garbage. The man who haunted my nightmares and fueled my ambition in equal measure. I opened the door, and my whole body went cold. My father stood there. But not the man who threw me away. This version looked smaller, thinner, defeated. His clothes hung loose. His face was gray. His eyes were hollow. He looked like he'd aged 20 years in the decade since I'd seen him. "Kara," he croaked, "I need your help." I didn't speak. Didn't move. Didn't breathe. It was the first time in my life that he was the vulnerable one, and I was the one holding all the power. Part of me wanted to slam the door. Part of me wanted to laugh in his face. Part of me wanted to cry for the girl who would have done anything to hear him say he needed her. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I stepped aside. Not out of kindness, but because I needed answers. I needed to understand what brought him here. What broke him enough to come crawling back to the daughter he'd thrown away like trash. So I let him in. And that decision changed everything. The moment he crossed my threshold, I saw him take in my home. The furniture. The art on the walls. The view from the windows. And I saw something flicker across his face that I couldn't quite read. He sat on my couch like it offended him. eyes darting, hands fidgeting. He looked around my home, the life I'd built, and I saw something flicker across his face. Was it regret? Pride? Jealousy? I couldn't tell. Maybe he couldn't either. Trent made some mistakes, he said finally. Mistakes. That word again. The word they used to excuse everything Trent did wrong while condemning everything I did right. Turns out those mistakes were 6 figures of debt and a failed business venture that dragged my father straight into financial ruin. The stepmother packed up and moved to her sister's place the moment the money dried up. No loyalty when the bank accounts emptied. Trent, hiding from creditors and dodging legal consequences. He looked at me with a desperation I'd never seen. I just need a place to stay for a while. Just until I get back on my feet. And all I thought was, so this is what rock bottom looks like from the outside. So this is what happens when the golden child fails and the scapegoat succeeds. The irony was almost poetic. The man who said I'd be nothing was now sitting in my home, begging for shelter. I let the silence stretch. Let him sit in his discomfort. Let him feel what it was like to need something from someone who had every right to say no. I didn't scream. I didn't demand an apology. I didn't unleash the years of anger I had every right to feel. I said calmly, "You can stay. For now." His shoulders loosened with relief. Mine stiffened with strategy. Letting him in wasn't forgiveness. It was observation. I needed to see who he was now, and whether he'd ever been anything different. I needed to understand if this broken man in front of me had any capacity for growth, for remorse, for change. Part of me also needed to prove something to myself. That I could face him without crumbling. That I was strong enough to hold all the power and not abuse it the way he had. That I was better than him. Better than the cruelty he showed me. Better than the abandonment he chose. So I let him stay. But I watched him carefully. Every word. Every movement. Every moment. I set up the guest room with clean sheets and towels. I showed him where everything was. And I laid down basic rules about respect and contribution. He nodded meekly like a chastened child. It was surreal seeing him like this. Powerless. Desperate. Human. It didn't take long for the old dynamic to try to crawl back. He criticized my decor. Too modern. My job. Logistics isn't real work. My cooking. Your mother made better. My friends. They seem flaky. At one point he said, "You've done well, considering your attitude back then." I forced a smile so tight it hurt. I watched him like a scientist watches a specimen. Detached, curious, clinical. He hadn't changed at all. Just lost his kingdom. The arrogance was still there, buried under the desperation. The entitlement was still there, hidden beneath the humility he tried to fake. The need to diminish me was still there, as strong as ever. He still thought he was better than me. He still thought he'd done nothing wrong. He still blamed everyone else for his failures. Trent, the stepmother, the economy, bad luck, everyone but himself. And in that moment I realized something important. He would never change. He would never see me as anything other than the problem child who somehow got lucky. And I was okay with that. Because his opinion didn't matter anymore. It had stopped mattering years ago. In a parking lot on a cold December night. On day 3, he tried to give me a list of chores. My chores. In my own home. Written on a napkin in his handwriting. Like I was still that 17-year-old girl he could order around. Like nothing had changed. Like I owed him something. I set the paper down between us. Met his eyes with absolute calm. Those days are over. You're a guest here. You'll contribute. And you will treat me with respect. His face went red. His jaw clenched. You don't talk to your father like that. Felt nothing. Just clarity. Just a cold, calm certainty. A father is someone who shows up, I said quietly. You stopped being one when you left me in a parking lot. He opened his mouth. Closed it. His face cycled through emotions. Anger, shame, defiance, defeat. He didn't speak for an hour. Just sat there, staring at the wall, processing the fact that his daughter was no longer afraid of him. The balance of power shifted. Permanently. He realized finally that this wasn't his house. This wasn't his life. And I wasn't his child anymore. I was the person keeping him off the streets. And that changed everything between us. Forever. He told me Trent scammed him. That he was an innocent victim. That he'd trusted his son and been betrayed. He painted himself as a loving father taken advantage of by a manipulative child. But I found documents tucked inside his jacket that told a different story. He co-signed the loans. He handled the money. He approved every transaction. He saw the red flags and ignored them because he couldn't accept that his golden child was a failure. This wasn't a man blindsided by betrayal. This was a man who gambled and lost. He'd poured my college fund and his retirement savings into Trent's schemes because he believed his golden child could do no wrong. And when it all collapsed, he blamed everyone but himself. Classic pattern. Same as always. He'd come to me not because he loved me, but because I was the last person who still cared enough to open a door. And even that wasn't love. It was hope. Hope that I was still the girl he could control. The girl who would sacrifice everything to earn his approval. The girl who would rescue him because she was too kind, too soft, too desperate for his affection. He was wrong. That girl died in a parking lot years ago. The woman who answered the door was someone else entirely. My stepmother called, dripping fake sympathy. "Oh honey, we're just so worried. We know you're taking good care of him." Her voice was sugary sweet, the same tone she used when spreading rumors about me to the neighbors. I asked one question. "Why didn't he stay with you?" Silence. Then scrambling. She didn't realize her mask slipped until it was too late. "We just need him stable until Trent gets through the hearing." Not help. Not care. Strategy. They wanted my address, my stability, my credibility as a shield for Trent. They wanted to use my success, the success they'd tried to prevent, to protect the son who'd destroyed everything. They wanted me to be the safety net for the people who cut my rope. She realized her mistake mid-sentence. Started backtracking. "I mean, we just think it's better if." I let her flail. Let her stumble through excuses. Let her feel the panic of being caught. Then I hung up. And I felt something settle inside me. Final understanding. They would never change. They would always use people. And I would never let them use me again. Not for guilt. Not for obligation. Not for anything. That chapter was closed. Permanently. I found it in my mail basket the next morning. Official forms listing my address as my father's permanent residence. Forms that, if processed, could make me financially responsible for his debts. Forms he'd filled out without asking me. Without telling me. Just like he'd emptied my college fund without telling me. My hands went cold. My breath caught. He hadn't come to reconnect. He'd come to use me. Again. After everything. After years of silence. After abandoning me with nothing. He still thought he could exploit me. Still thought I was his backup plan. His safety net. His solution. I looked at the paper and felt something inside me finally go quiet. Not shattered. Not hurt. Just done. Completely, utterly done. The last thread of obligation snapped. Whatever daughter instinct I had left dissolved. He wasn't my father anymore. He was just a man I used to know. A man who kept making the same mistakes. And I was done paying for them. I photographed every document. Made copies. Built a file. Because if he was going to try to legally bind me to his problems, I was going to legally protect myself. With precision. With documentation. With zero emotion. The lawyer was shocked. "You are not liable," she said. "But you need to act quickly. He's trying to establish residency. Once that's official, it gets complicated. Courts sometimes side with elderly parents, especially if they can prove dependency." He nodded. Already a step ahead. I drafted documents. I documented conversations. I prepared every boundary with professionalism and precision. This wasn't a plan to destroy him. This was a plan to remove myself, cleanly, from the wreckage he created. Revenge, I learned, isn't about hurting someone back. It's about refusing to let them hurt you again. It's about building walls so strong that their chaos can't touch you anymore. It's about walking away with your dignity intact. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to sabotage. I was simply going to do what he taught me to do years ago. I was going to cut ties. Completely. Permanently. The way he cut me loose in that parking lot. Except I would do it legally. Properly. With documentation. With witnesses. With zero loopholes he could exploit later. My lawyer helped me draft everything. Eviction notice. Cease and desist. Financial separation agreement. It was all very clean. Very professional. Very final. I brought him to a building gathering in our lounge. Partly out of courtesy. Partly to let him see the life I built. The neighbors I knew. The respect I'd earned. The community I belonged to. I wanted witnesses. I wanted people to see him. To know who he was. He tried to brag. Tried to spin the narrative. My daughter, always been so driven. She gets it from me. The room went silent. People glanced at me. They knew my story. I'd shared pieces of it over the years. Coffee conversations. Late-night talks. Building friendships. They'd watched me build this life from nothing. They knew I'd done it alone. And for the first time, my father realized charm wouldn't save him. He looked small. Exposed. Transparent. It was the first time I'd ever seen him embarrassed on my behalf. Felt appropriate. Felt like justice. Quiet, simple, undeniable justice. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, touched my arm gently as we left. She didn't say anything. Just squeezed once. She understood. And that small gesture meant more than any apology my father could have given. 'Cause it was real. It was genuine. It was the kind of support I'd built for myself, piece by piece, relationship by relationship. Later that night, I asked the question that had been eating at me for a decade. Why did you throw me out? He exhaled, annoyed. Like I was bothering him with ancient history. Like it wasn't important. As if you didn't provoke it. I stared at him. Waited. Listen. He blamed Trent for setting things up. Blamed my attitude for making everything difficult. Blamed stress at work. Blamed the economy. Blamed my stepmother's insecurities. Never himself. Not once. Not even a flicker of accountability. In that moment, the last strand of obligation snapped. He had abandoned me then. I was abandoning the hope he'd ever change now. I was abandoning the fantasy of reconciliation. The dream of an apology. The possibility of redemption. None of it was coming. And I was finally okay with that. Because I didn't need it anymore. I'd already moved on. I'd built a life. Healed. And thrive. His approval or remorse couldn't add anything to who I'd become. I was complete without it. And that realization was the most freeing thing I'd ever felt. The next morning, I handed him a folder. Clean, organized, legally vetted exit plan. Every page labeled. Every clause explained. Everything reviewed by my lawyer. You have 14 days to leave, I said softly. You must remove my address from all filings. And you will sign this statement confirming I am not responsible for any debts. He stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Like I'd betrayed him somehow. You can't do this to me, he whispered. I met his eyes with a calm he never taught me. A strength he never gave me. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm ending what you started. He didn't speak for hours. Just sat there, staring at the papers, realizing that the daughter he threw away had become the woman he couldn't manipulate. The woman who wouldn't rescue him. The woman who'd learned to protect herself the way he never protected her. Later he tried pleading. I'm your father. You were my father, I corrected. You gave up that title in a parking lot. Now you're just a man who needs to find somewhere else to live. I've given you 2 weeks. Use them wisely. My stepmother showed up 2 days later. Nails perfect, makeup flawless, voice shaking with fake emotion. Kara, sweetheart, we're family. Let's talk. I leaned against the doorframe and let her perform. Promises, stories, manipulation polished to a shine. She was good at this. Years of practice. But her eyes gave her away. They always did. She wasn't there for him. She was there for Trent. For the safety net she thought I might become. For the backup plan they'd always treated me as. She wanted me to take responsibility for the mess they'd created together. She wanted me to save them. She wanted me to be the solution to problems I didn't create. Just like always. I told her gently but firmly. No. One word. 2 letters. But it carried the weight of a decade of pain, growth, and finally learning to value myself. She wasn't used to hearing that from me. The quiet girl who never fought back. The scapegoat who absorbed all the blame. She left in a flurry of indignation, heels clicking angrily down the hallway. I didn't chase her. Closed the door, locked it, and breathed. It felt like closing the final chapter of a book I should have finished years ago. The deadlines passed. His protections expired. Creditors circled. Hearings began. And Trent, the golden child, the one he sacrificed me for, the one he poured my college fund into, blamed everything on him. Publicly. In court documents. In witness statements. The betrayal was complete. My father's world crumbled exactly the way he'd let mine crumble years ago. But here's the important part. I didn't sabotage him. I didn't interfere. I didn't lift a finger to make things worse. He destroyed himself. Through his choices. His priorities. His refusal to see reality. His inability to take responsibility. I simply stepped out of the way. I removed myself from the blast radius. And I watched from a safe distance as everything he'd built on lies and favoritism collapsed under its own weight. It wasn't revenge. It was consequence. And there's a difference. Revenge requires action. Consequence just requires truth. He left on day 13. 1 day early. Couldn't even face me on the final day. He took what little he had and disappeared without a word. No apology. No acknowledgement. No growth. Just silence. And honestly, that told me everything I needed to know. He was exactly who I thought he was. A month later, I was promoted to Director of Operations. When my boss announced it in the company meeting, my team clapped so loudly I felt my eyes sting. I walked through my office with a steadiness that didn't come from revenge, but from finally understanding my own worth. Not because someone gave it to me, but because I built it, piece by piece, decision by decision, sacrifice by sacrifice. That night, I sat on my balcony, legs curled beneath me, watching the city lights flicker. I had built this life alone. Through the attic years. Through the double shifts. Through the nights I cried myself to sleep. Through every moment I thought I wouldn't make it. Through every time I wanted to give up. Built this. And no one could take it from me. Not him. Not anyone. On his final allowed night in my condo, I left a note on the kitchen table. Not cruel. Not petty. Just honest. I hope you find the strength to take responsibility for your life. I did. When I came home from work the next day, he was gone. No apology. No confrontation. No goodbye. Just a quiet, empty space where he used to be. The same way there had once been a quiet, empty space where a father should have been. Brewed tea. Opened the balcony door. Sat in the calm I'd created. And I whispered to myself, walking away isn't losing. Sometimes it's the only way you win. And that is how I became the woman he never believed I could be. The woman who survived his abandonment. The woman who built a life worth living. The woman who learned that the best revenge is simply living well. Not for him. Not against him. Just for myself. Finally, completely, beautifully for myself. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving someone wrong. It's becoming so strong that their opinion stops mattering entirely. I didn't need his approval anymore. I didn't need his love. I didn't need his acknowledgement. I just needed to keep being the woman who survived everything he did to her and came out stronger. That parking lot didn't break me. Built me. And I would never forget that.